I didn't notice the silence right away, at first. It just felt like the calm that settles into a house after a long, tiring week. Then my daughter asked where her cello was. She was 11. Still small enough that the instrument looked too big in her arms, but she carried it with a seriousness that always surprised people. The cello had belonged to my grandmother, old, darkened by time. Its finish worn thin where generations of hands had rested. 2 years earlier, Grandma had handed it to my daughter without ceremony, just a quiet afternoon and a simple, "It should stay in the family." Now the music room was empty. Only the pale outline on the floor showed where the stand had once been, the wood lighter where it hadn't aged. I told my daughter it was probably being cleaned or repaired, and even as I said it, I could hear how unconvincing it sounded. My parents didn't call me, so I called them. They talked fast, cutting over each other, as if rushing could turn excuses into reasons. The cello was valuable, they said. They had the right connections. It had just been sitting there. My sisters' kids needed a pool exercise, happiness, memories. This was for the family. They dropped the number like it would settle everything. It is $7,000. When I asked why they hadn't talked to me first, there was a pause. Then my father said softly, "We didn't think you'd understand." That familiar feeling came back, the one where my place in the family shrank into something small and bendable, something easy to move aside when it suited everyone else. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I told them I needed time and ended the call. That night, my daughter practiced on a borrowed school cello. It sounded fine, technically, but she kept stopping, frowning, shifting her fingers like something important just wouldn't fall into place. For 2 days, I didn't tell my grandmother. She was 90, sharp as ever, but physically fragile. I told myself I was protecting her. Really, I was protecting the last fragile belief I had left about my parents. When I finally drove her over, I rehearsed every word in my head. I expected anger. I expected heartbreak. I expected to hold her hand while she grieved a piece of her past. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she stayed quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, not warmly, not cruelly, just with a knowing look. "The cello was never truly a gift," she said. "Not in the way they believed." I saw my parents' faces change before she explained anything. They went pale, like they'd just heard something I couldn't yet hear. She told us about my grandfather, about how the cello had been bought together with another musician in the family, about a trust that had been set up quietly years ago. The cello had been placed with us. Yes, but it was never fully ours. There were conditions, there were documents. I let them assume. She said calmly, "I wanted to see what they would do." No one spoke. The room felt smaller, as if the walls had slowly closed in. She asked me to take a folder from her bag. Inside were copies of old but carefully kept papers. She dialed a number I didn't recognize and spoke briefly and clearly. Alora, calm, direct. Not angry. Authority arrived without drama, a formal notice, a clear timeline. The sale was invalid. The money had to be recovered. The pool, already half-built, had suddenly become a problem instead of a dream. My parents tried to explain themselves again, but their words had no weight anymore. There was nothing left to argue. The process had begun, and it didn't care about their intentions. Over the following weeks, the money was pulled back through systems I barely understood. The cello, already sold to a private collector overseas, couldn't be returned. That loss was heavy, and no one pretended otherwise. My sister stopped calling. My parents spoke less, and when they did, their voices were cautious, like they weren't sure where they stood anymore. My grandmother never bragged or brought it up again. Instead, she focused on my daughter, listening as she played, correcting her posture, sharing stories about music instead of the instrument that was gone. Eventually, the trust paid for a new cello. It wasn't the same, it never could be. But it was chosen carefully, legally, and it was undeniably hers. Our family never went back to what it had been. Something broke quietly, without shouting or slammed doors. What replaced it was thinner, more honest, and tinged with sadness. Months later, I stood in the hallway listening to my daughter practice. The notes wavered, then steadied, imperfect, real. I thought about what had been taken, and what had been uncovered instead. Some legacies are things you can hold. Others are limits you finally see. This one was finally clear.